Hello and welcome to the University of Law. Last year I did a video reviewing all of the Big Finish releases of 2022 and I'm doing the same now in what's becoming an annual tradition for 2023. I've already recorded a video looking ahead to 2024, but I was waiting for the much anticipated 7th Doctor Last Day box set to come out, Volume 1, which it has today. So I've now listened to it in one sitting. I've just released a video about that because I absolutely love that story. And I'm now going over the other releases from the year. So last year ended, I'll just quickly recap, with The War Doctor Begins, He Who Fights With Monsters, which was an absolutely stellar set to end the year. And I absolutely loved that one as well. And again, we're ending the year on another high with the 7th Doctor Last Day. Well, the first set this year was another Time War set, and that was the Time War 5 Cass, which I really loved. All these stories you can see my reviews of on the channel from the year gone. It's the first year I've done a whole year of reviews. But yeah, what was great about this is that we had Cass back. We've got Alex, the Doctor's great-grandson, back. There were some great Dalek stories. I loved the trailer. The trailer was really good. Some great CGI, really bringing the Time War to life on visual, not just audio as well. So it was a really strong start to the year and the first of many brilliant 8th Doctor releases this year as well. Now, moving on, the Ninth Doctor Adventures, Shades of Fear, another strong set. It was the finale to the second season of Ninth Doctor Adventures. It wasn't as... So the first series ended with a Cyberman story that kind of brought together a lot of the themes of that series, and the Cybermen came back having been planted earlier. It felt more like the first series on television, whereas this wasn't so much a finale in that sense. But nevertheless, it was a very good story, a really enjoyable story. I think this was the one with Frank Skinner in, if I remember correctly. Yeah, Frank Skinner was in this set as well, and it introduced Callan as a kind of companion for the Ninth Doctor, who would then feature in the next set as well. So it was nice for him to have a mini companion, and hopefully we get some more stories set between Series 2 and Series 3 at some point in the future. Maybe Series 4 maybe will be set in between them and have a whole series of Callan. Maybe it'll be Rose. Who knows? Speculation is for a future video. We then had in February as well the 3rd Doctor, The Return of Jo Jones. This was done really well. The whole idea of bringing Jo back at a later point in her life could have gone either way. It was done very well, and I shouldn't have been surprised by that because it's Big Finish. They always do a fantastic job. But yeah, they brought the character back in a really fulfilling way, and they also built on a lot of the other media we've had since, not only the Big Finish stuff, but also a lot of the trailers we've seen for the collection sets. And obviously we learned about the passing of her husband, Cliff, and it was done in a beautiful way, really lovely way, and that was enforced by Tales of the TARDIS on television later in the year. But it was great to see that. It's all tying together so well at the moment, and it was great to see that in this set as well as on television. Then moving on, it was the first 4th Doctor set of the year. I loved Margaret. I didn't remember the character too well, actually, from my appearance in, was it Series 10 or 11? I can't remember now, but she's back. Loved the character in this set. In particular, I really enjoyed... Well, I like both stories, actually. They're both perfect. Loved the Ice Warriors. In particular, I thought the second story was quite intriguing about Antilia the Lost. Really intriguing. A great performance from Anjali Mahindra, who I'll be talking about in a moment as well. Then we had, in March as well, we had another 4th Doctor story. We had Strange Chemistry. This was the 8th of March annual box set celebrating International Women's Day. It was a great little story, particularly showcasing Leela. Yeah, and she wrote the story as well, Louise Jameson. It was a great little showcase for her, and I learned a lot about Marie Curie as well, which was a really good story. And then, of course, a highlight of the set was the story that kind of brought Amy Pond back for the first time, played by young Amelia, and we kind of saw a teenage Amy Pond meeting Missy. I thought that was a really great fusion of the 11th and 12th era, Doctor's eras, the two kind of halves of the Stephen Moffat era. That was quite interesting. We then had the 5th Doctor Adventures, Conflicts of Interest. In particular, my highlight of this set was both stories were really strong. I enjoyed both of them, but for me the highlight was the short trip that came with it. That was a really great performance and a really strong reading from Dan Starkey. Really enjoyed that, and it tied in nicely to the first story. It was great to see, and I hope they do more of that, tying in, building this universe, re-expanding it out with these extra little bits of stories. Yeah, it was really immersive hearing that extra story. It brought the whole thing to life. Yeah, gobbledygook, that's it. Then we had the Robots, Series 6. I've enjoyed this series throughout. I have to say, I don't usually don't talk about spin-offs on the channel unless the Doctor's in it, and the Doctor is in this, makes a cameo in the final story. It's great to kind of see it all come together. A particular highlight of the set was the second story, Face to Face, which I have to say kept me guessing right to the end. I thought I knew what was going on, and then it kept on changing my expectations. That was really good. And there was bits where I thought maybe that was going to happen, then it didn't, and then it did. So yeah, I won't spoil it for you, but that was a really good story. And the first one was quite a moving story about the nature of sentience and what it means to be sentient. It's a really strong box that really playing to the strengths of these incredible creatures, the robots, who I believe we lost Chris Boucher this year, who invented such a wonderful world that's still being mined, if you pardon the pun, by Big Finish all these decades later. Then, again, I don't talk about spin-offs normally, but this was quite a seismic one. We got Anjali Mahindra back as Rani and Clyde back for Anthony... Is his name Anthony Ryan? Daniel Anthony back as Clyde. We've obviously had this week, I haven't heard it yet, this week or last week, we had the second set with Luke back as well. But yeah, it was a really strong set. In particular, there was a really strong opener, really felt like a Sarah Jane story. Of course, Joseph Lister wrote it, who wrote the original Sarah Jane Adventure stories. He wrote several of those. Destination Wedding was probably my favourite. That was a really intriguing one. But actually, no, the Witch Tree, they're all perfect. They're all so different. They're all perfect in different ways. I loved them so much. I thought the last one with the podcast element was really quite engaging. They were all engaging. And the whole idea of Rani and Clyde's relationship, I have to say, I was a little bit confused because he was meant... I won't go into spoilers, but I thought the character was going in one direction, and I thought, how can they be bringing in this romance? And it all kind of made sense. And it also adds up very nicely again with what they've done with Tales of the TARDIS later in the year on television as well. So again, nice to see this cohesive universe in the Rusty Davies era. Wonderful. We then had the first part of the Once and Future series, Past Lives, the Fourth Doctor story. It was a great little unit story. Sarah Jane was back, the Monk was back. It was a fusion of modern and classic unit. Had a monster that had been previously encountered by the Doctor, but on an off-screen adventure. Yeah, it felt at the start, the first 15, 20 minutes, I thought, where on earth is this going? But it tied together really well, and it was a lovely party, this one. It was very much just a celebration of Doctor Who. It was a load of things that you love about Doctor Who chucked in together and mixed in. And it was really just a piece of fun, really. Then we got the Ninth Doctor Adventures Pioneers. It was the second set in the the first set of Series 3. Again, we had Callan. We had a nice little send-off for that character in The Green Gift, which was a nice little sequel to The Green Death. So we'd had a sequel to The Green Death kind of with Joe Jones earlier in the year, and then we had this as well. Northern Lights was another wonderful story. I learned from that I learned from the last story as well. I learned a lot about history from the last two stories, and clearly, especially the last one, clearly something of passion for the actor Christopher Eccleston as well. Then we had our first War Doctor set of the year in May, Comrades in Arms, which brought back the character of Case. Some great Daleks in this as well, and really kind of, bring together this cohesive time where it really felt like all the sets this year really kind of linked together, and we're telling this ongoing story with the Berserker Daleks featuring in many of the sets this year as well. So that was really fun. Then we had Sixth Doctor Adventures Purity Unleashed to finish May off. We had both of the sets this year. This one had a really great finale, if I remember correctly, which led nicely into the last box set. But again, all the stories in there were really strong stories, and we're telling this ongoing story across 12 episodes, beautifully telling this story. All these stories are thematically linked, telling this wider story. First story had some interesting moments by Matthew Sweet as well. We then had Solitary Confinement kicking off June, which was the War Master. There were some particularly dark moments in this set. One about Fish. I remember correctly, there was a really dark moment about Fish. I think that was in the second story. Some quite chilling moments. The Alexander Bennett one was fantastic. The last one was really... And yeah, the last one brought together this kind of thing that had been thematically linking the four stories. All four of them are just superb. Just really, again, always just a strong set of stories. The Ark was an interesting one. It was an interesting take on what could have been. It felt very different to the Ark in Space, so it's nice to have a lost story that is of a story that actually came to be, but in a completely different way. And I really enjoyed the fact that it wasn't the same story. It was very different. It did have similarities to the Seventh Doctor story, Naomi's arc. It felt interesting they came around the same time. There were some interesting links. Not the same story by any stretch, but there were some interesting links, and thematically, that there were some similar things that were explored in the two stories. Then we have the next Once and Future in the same month. So June was a busy month. This one felt more like a character piece, more of an exploration of the character of the Doctor on the anniversary. Really deep exploration through bringing the curator on board. It was a really interesting use of the curator. I think he didn't feel like a novelty. There was a real reason for him to be there, and it really felt like it was his story. We were learning about the Doctor through the curator, and just great to see Jenny and the Fifth Doctor interacting as always. Then we had the final Fourth Doctor set for Series 12. 4 stories, I believe. There was an extra one that goes to Margaret. Yeah, they were all really good. Stone Cold was... they were all good. The first one was great. The second one was really interesting. Lovely World War II theme. It had a lovely Chris Chapman feel to it. Stone Cold really felt like the Time of Angels two-parter. Great performance from Victor Maguire. And then The Ghost of Margaret was a great send-off for the character. I've really loved the Margaret stories this year, and while I'd love to see the character again in maybe some sets in between the two, it actually felt like a nice arc in its own right, and in some ways I don't want it to be disturbed. I think it was a great character arc for her, beautifully written, beautifully performed by all involved. I really enjoyed that arc. Speaking of earlier, Seventh Doctor Adventures, we had his set this year featuring Naomi and Harry. There'll be more of that, my speculation, for next year. We had another World War II story, our second one in June. Just on the Blitz. It was a shame we didn't get Churchill in as a cameo. That would have been quite fun. That's happened before, but it was still a really strong story. Vash and Narada back, great fit for the Seventh Doctor. But I think my highlight was Naomi's arc, which again had similarities to the arc. It felt like there was a great one recently. Was it The Glory of Earth? Recently, with the First Doctor range with David Bradley a couple of years back, it just had that similar feel to it. But I really enjoyed that kind of lost in space kind of feel, drifting through space. But yeah, really great story for Naomi. Really showcased Naomi, who we're going to see more of and learn a little bit more about when we get her debut at last next year with the Fourth Doctor. Then we had a Genius for War, probably my favourite of the Once and Futures, because it was the next chapter in the Davros saga, with the time where it really kind of carried on from where we were last time with Davros captured. Now that we know that this is a War Doctor era story, it's interesting to know that the whole Nightmare Child thing, hopefully, we'll see the War Doctor involved. I'll get to see the War Doctor up against Davros at some point, because on this occasion the War Doctor was in his 7th incarnation likeness at the time. Then we had James Robert McCrimmon, a really strong set of stories, great chemistry between Fraser Hines and the son of Patrick Troughton. In particular, The Green Man, the second story, had a great sort of James Stewart, Alfred Hitchcock vibe to it. Is it Rear Window? Had that great feel to it. Really loved that. It played all 3 stories. They had the humour, that twinkle of those 2 characters. But there was always that genuine threat there, and that genuine fear, and serious moments felt all the more serious for the moments of light relief as well. And the Shroud was a great finale that's really set up. Well, I don't know where we're going in the next set, but they're on the run. The Dalek Emperor's still out there on Gallifrey. Let's see whether it comes together next year or whether we keep going with this incredible arc. Then we have my favourite Ninth Doctor set of the year, the last one of the year, Travel in Hope. My favourite, simply, well, The Butler Did It was a great story, a great little twist on that genre. Below there, really fun story. Quite such a it felt like it could have been made in the 80s. It's one of those great stories that Big Finish does so well on the audio format. But the highlight for me was Run, which had the Ice Warriors with the Ninth Doctor and Alpha Centauri, little origin story. Really enjoyed that set. As I say, with the Ninth Doctor stuff, it gets better every time. I don't know how they do it, but it does get better every time. If you ask me what my favourite Ninth Doctor set is, it's always the one that's just come out. That was August, the 1st of August. Then also in August we had Two's Company, Once and Future story, which there's lots of different elements. It brought lots of elements of Doctor Who together. We've got Harry Sullivan, older. We had the Sick Doctor, Jackie. We had Lady Christina. All sorts of elements. We had the 2 setting up the finale. It was, again, like the first one, a nice little fun sort of mishmash of what Doctor Who can be. Then we had the finale to the Purity saga, with Purity Unbound. Some great performances, I have to say, here from Toby Haydock. The opening story was excellent, really set the tone for the box set. The middle one, again, I found it quite intriguing, some really interesting sci-fi elements. And then, of course, the finale really brought it all together. I think, you kind of had Mel more at the front and centre in the middle of the box, and then we had the Sixth Doctor back for the finale, and obviously some lovely references back to include Evelyn Smythe in some way in the set as well, which was fantastic, bearing in mind it was her university, it was her who brought the characters together, and of course Jacqueline Rayner, who's overseen this master plan, of course, wrote her very first story for Evelyn Smythe all the way back with that incredible story, Marrying Conspiracy, which is still my favourite Sixth Doctor story, and it would be very hard for anything to overtake that. And it's nice to see at the end of this set that Hebe is carrying on travelling with the Doctor and Mel, so let's see if that gets picked up again in future sets. My favourite Fifth Doctor set of the year was this one, In the Night. Resistor was a great story, but for me the best one was Pursuit of the Nightjar. I loved it because it told us a little bit more about the Doctor as a character. In the anniversary years, or coming up to the months before the big anniversary. I remember they did this last time in the 50th, with the Fifth Doctor. We learned about the Doctor's first TARDIS in a really great Fifth Doctor story with Turlough, Nyssa and Tegan. And here we learned about the Doctor's inspiration, the Nightjar, the hero that set the First Doctor on his journey to becoming the character that we love. It was a great little origin story, but through the eyes of the Fifth Doctor, reappraising a classic, the original Doctor, through the Fifth Doctor. Then we had Martian Invasion of Planetoid 50, the very first Once and Future to feature David Tennant. First time David Tennant's been in a kind of anniversary story, if you don't include Big Finish's 20th anniversary when they did Legacy of Time, but a Doctor Who anniversary on audio. It was great to see him with Missy. It was a different master to have him up against, and it was nice to kind of play on some of those classic sci-fi stories that Doctor Who itself was inspired by, those kind of classic H.G. Wells kind of an Orwellian stories that Doctor Who was taking inspiration from. It's like paying homage to those, and it felt a little bit like some of the early McGanns. Speaking of early McGanns, in September we also had The Dying Hours, which was the first story this year to feature Charlie Pollard. We had Charlie Pollard back with the Eighth Doctor. That's all we thought we were getting this year. Well, that wasn't the case at all, was it? It was a great set. I've loved the Doomsday Initiative all year this year. I really enjoyed it. The first one, I loved Dalek's Master Plan. It was great to see a kind of prequel to that based on one of the lines that Mavic Chen makes in the first episodes about the Dawn of Everlasting Peace. Jacqueline Renner loves that story, and it really pays off here. For anyone who's invested in that story, all the episodes are on BBC Sounds, by the way, at the moment, free of charge, if you've got a TV licence. If anyone's invested in the missing episodes, the surviving clips, the soundtracks, the recons, the recreation of Mission to the Unknown, if anyone's immersed themselves in this fantastic 13-part epic, essentially, this will really pay off. You'll really enjoy this. A Date with Destiny was an enjoyable one. Nice to see Jackie back. Another Jackie Tyler story this year. There's been quite a few of those. The Howling Wolves was a really interesting story. It felt similar to a werewolf story we got in the Sixth of the Last Adventure set with Charlie. And The Crowd was the one that had Charlie in and the Eighth Doctor in. First time it was the only time we've actually had the actress of Doom acting against the Doctor. And that was really exciting as well, have the Eighth Doctor and set her off on her final chapter, her final hour. And the idea of The Crowd was an interesting concept as well, an interesting use of time travel, which similar to the use of time travel that we saw actually in the Nightjar story. That was interesting that there was kind of a similar thematic link there. Then we had Manoeuvres, the Gallifrey War Room set of the year. It's great to see all these characters come together, like Narvin, the General, Vecklin, Rasmus, and Alistair's really putting the strings here. Leela, of course, how could I forget Leela? No Raston in this set, but his presence is very much felt in the background, especially through Alistra, who's really, they're basically all at Alistra's mercy now. So it's an interesting way to go into set 3 now, knowing that all of these characters are now very much beholden to Alistra. She has got them where she wants them. So it's a great dynamic to kind of go into the next set with. Then we got Once and Future, Time Lord Memorial. Great to see the Ninth Doctor involved in this anniversary. First time Ninth Doctor's been involved in any kind of anniversary story, whether on television or audio. And great to see him sharing the screen, or sharing the CD, I should say, with another Doctor, with the Unbound Doctor, David Warner, in his final appearance as the Unbound Doctor. Livchenko was in it. There were some great elements. Really, the whole idea of the Tunnel Immemorial was a really interesting concept from Lisa McMullen. Really interesting, really intriguing. Really kind of reflected on the character of the Doctor, the whole idea of him seeing all of his past, all of his lives on show. It was great to see this Doctor in particular reflecting on the whole history, because I think often you see the Night Doctor in a bubble of that first series, 2005, but to see him reflecting on his whole past and then to get him calling out for Susan at the end of the set was just a dream come true for the 60th. We then had the Paternoster Gang, a new series called Trespassers. This was Volume 1. We now have an idea of who the Trespassers are. They're disguising themselves as various characters. They are now in place of Vastra. It wasn't Vastra who married Jenny after all. It was an imposter. It was a trespasser. And someone was also trespassing the Doctor, the 8th Doctor. 8th Doctor got to see the wedding. Great performance from Paul McGann. Great little guest character, little guest role. Interesting to see a different Doctor other than the 9th. Dealing with the Paternoster Gang, although they were with the 10th Doctor in the recent Once and Future one that I should have mentioned earlier. Interestingly, actually, David Tennant did mention about having been at their wedding, and I wonder if that inspired this story, but obviously it was the 8th Doctor. Maybe Paul McGann was available and not David Tennant to do that, but that was really interesting. And I hope we get more of Paul McGann as this series continues with volumes 2, 3 and 4. Maybe we'll get the 8th Doctor back. Maybe it will be him as a trespasser. I know certainly there is a set coming out where it's the Master set with Eric Roberts, where the 8th Doctor is going to be in it, but it's not the 8th Doctor, it's an imposter. So maybe they'll do this thing that will carry on. It won't be the 8th Doctor, but it will be one of these trespassers. Maybe you can't tell quite which one it is, but that would be interesting. Then we have the Union, the grand finale to Once and Future. Obviously, there's the Coda coming next year, but as it stands, this was the finale. Tom Baker was back. Great to see all the Doctors. In particular, I was intrigued by David Tennant's scene with Susan, where he kind of implies that he's going to go looking for Susan after the time. Well, maybe Susan survives. Maybe that's going to be on television. Maybe that's a little link to Rusty Davis. Maybe that's going to be in Coda. Or maybe it's going to be in a future 10th Doctor Big Finish box set. Who knows? But I hope they do explore and pick up on that lovely little thread. It would be a shame to leave that hanging. But again, great to see the 8th Doctor back. And what was great was, Once and Future is... I thought it was the 8th Doctor, but it's not. It's the War Doctor. And in the same way that 10 years ago we reflected on who the Doctor was by having the incarnation of the War Doctor, who's not the Doctor, he's the person who rejected the Doctor's promise. And we've got to reflect on the Doctor based on who he was by looking at the incarnation who wasn't him. But here they reaffirm the fact that he's very much still the Doctor, and actually you can tell who the Doctor is by looking at this incarnation. And what's most important actually is he is still very much the Doctor, and they're very much proud of him. And it was great that in some ways he's the most Doctor of all the Doctors because he has the hardest job. So again, they did a beautiful job of using that incarnation to say something about the character in this crucial anniversary year. Then we move on to Audacity, which great opening set to introduce Audacity, a great opening story. And the Great Cyber was a fantastic two-parter. I love Big Finish Dalek stuff. I think in general, not just on audio but on television, Cyberman stories don't always tend to grab me. But this one really did. It was an epic story, and it really built off the amazing potential that's there in Revenge of the Cybermen. One of my favourite stories, actually, especially since they put the new CGI on the Blu-ray set. But yeah, it was a great story, and of course it ended with and it has some really great links about cyber history and gold and time travel and all that. I'm guessing that might be linking to the possible Time War links for the character of Audacity, because the actress was in the Time War, and they've said that's not a coincidence. But it was great to see Charlie back, because we'd wondered where this was set. I thought it was going to be pre-Charlie, but they'd on purpose not mentioned Charlie in the press release, and it did get a lot of us talking and speculating, and it turns out it's because it's set between that first and second series of Charlie Pollard stories. Excuse me. We then had Rogue Encounters, a great War Master set. Runtime was a great little Dalek story, with a great link about a little thing about the Master, the fact that we got to see a crucial planet in the Master's development as a planet that he will destroy early on in his reign, I should say, his reign of evil. Manhunt was a really fun story. Lots of twists and turns there. The Sublime Port was, quite comical at times, but quite scarier in others. And I had a great cliffhanger. I wonder if that cliffhanger is going to be built upon in the final set next year, the very final one of the Scott Hancock era. I'm assuming there's more after that, but without Scott Hancock. But it's the last one of his wonderful stewardship of this brilliant series that he's crafted from the beginning. Because the finale to number 3 didn't get picked up in number 4. Number 4 jumped ahead in a beautiful piece that was a Yana story, and how the Master is kind of always there, ruining things for Yana. And I love the character of Yana so much, and it was great. I listened to a whole box of Yana stuff. It really built on that incredible world building by Rusty Davis in Utopia, and it really you felt you knew it even after just a 45-minute episode, and it just to return to that world after 16 years was just a great experience, and I'd love them to do more of it actually. Then we had In the Bleak Midwinter, which was the next 8th Doctor set. It was the final set of the year for the 8th Doctor. Carried on from Audacity, very much in the theme of the Chimes of Midnight, to which there was a kind of reference, a half reference to the fact that Christmas wouldn't be Christmas without the Christmas puddings. I've got that line completely wrong, but Charlie has no idea why she said that, and of course we know it's a meta reference to the fact that in her future she will encounter that with Chimes of Midnight. But in all, it was a great story. I think I've done a review of this already. But yeah, the last one was a great story. It kind of felt similar to the finale to the 9th Doctor Series 1 with Scotland, and a nice exploration of what's familiar to Roy Gill. I love it when writers write what they know. The Empty Man was a really interesting Christmas tale, looking kind of the scary story side of that. But my highlight was the first story with Santa and Jason Watkins and time travel, and makes you wonder why the 8th Doctor ever went back to Baker Street in Stranded, when this had already happened earlier in his life, and his long-term living there had caused problems for the timeline. But there we go. We then had The War Doctor Begins, Enemy Mine. A lovely way to wrap up this 6-part saga of The War Doctor Begins. And again, as with many of the stories this year, this story said something about the character of the Doctor. In particular, it said something about the War Doctor by having him confront the 8th Doctor. He's finally accepted that he's not that man anymore. He couldn't save Cass, only the Doctor could save him. He's not that man anymore. He had to get the Doctor back to save her, because he can't do it. He's finally accepted that he's not that man. It'll be interesting, with that struggle gone, him and Case kind of, I think, had that affinity because they were both struggling with who they were. He's accepted who he is. She's out of the picture now, and with her out of the picture, we're interested to see how far he goes as the warrior in whatever they got planned next. Because The War Doctor Begins is over. He's not beginning anymore. He's established, and what we're going to see next, who knows what we're going to be prepared for. They haven't announced nothing yet. We are getting, in either March or April, the Centauran story will feature him. I'm guessing it will continue from this release, and quite what we're going to see with the War Doctor next, maybe I'll speculate in a future video. Revenge of Wormwood I haven't listened to yet. I listened to the first 15 minutes on the Big Finish podcast, and it was great. They really brought back Luke really well. They haven't taken the easy route with these characters. They brought them back in really interesting, creative ways. And finally, and I've done an extensive video on this, I really enjoyed it, I've just listened to it, 7th Doctor The Last Day Volume 1. It's a perfect end to the year. I thought last year's final release was excellent. Well, they've done it again. They've upped it even more. It's the perfect celebration of the 7th Doctor era in one fantastic 3-hour package. So I definitely recommend you go out and listen to it. And it's very much a reward for anyone who's followed the 7th Doctor over the last 20 years. Well, 40 years on screen, but 20 years on audio in particular. It really builds on so many of the ranges. In the same way that the 6th Doctor The Last Day release kind of gave us 4 releases throughout the 6th Doctor's era as tentpoles, one with Charlie, one with Constance, one with Flip, one with Mel, and kind of use those tentpoles to tell a wider story. This is using tentpoles that are already there. It's using the Quantum Possibility Engine. It's using Dark Universe. These big tentpoles, the Gods and Monsters. These big tentpoles of the 7th Doctor era, and they're all finales in their own rights to these different arcs. Well, this is the finale of all finales, and I can't wait to see what they do with it in part 2 in a few months' time. So that's my review of 2023. I couldn't possibly give a favourite because they were all absolutely brilliant. I think I've listened to this one today. This is fresh in my mind. It's my favourite. But there's been so many brilliant releases, and in particular, they've really explored the character of the Doctor this year in the anniversary year. I can't wait to see what they've got planned for 2024, and that video is coming out tomorrow, where I look ahead and speculate as to what might happen next year. But what's your favourites? What were your favourite releases on audio? Obviously, television, we had 4 excellent episodes on television, plus a couple of spin-offs. But based on audio, what was your favourite? Do let me know in the comments below. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe. I look forward to speaking to you soon.